Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with Mary Patterson, who's authored several books and is working on a screenplay about life in Italy and Italian Americans. So, welcome, Mary. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me today.
I'd like to start. I know your family is originally from Sicily, correct? And you came when I think you were about 3 years old?
Yes, I came to this country when I was 3.5. I was the youngest of the 6 girls when my mother and father came over to this country.
So 6 girls, that must have been a handful for your father, huh?
Yeah, he went a little nuts living with 7 women. I have to give him a lot of credit. He did quite well.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, my mom's family had they had 9 children, but it was 6 boys and 3 girls, so a little bit easier. And you came, interestingly enough, just around the same time as my uncle John. And what's interesting there is when my grandparents came in 1915, they left their oldest son behind in Torito. And he was there with his grandparents, and he didn't come till came to Canada about 1950, and then finally to America about 1954 or 55 or something like that. So all my cousins, you know, they were all born there, or they all had Italian accents. So, you know, we kind of grew up with that. So what brought your family here? I know it was right after the war, right?
Yes, it was right after the war. My father was concerned that he wouldn't have enough money to pay for my sister's dowries, so he decided to come to America. My mother was an American citizen. She was actually born here. My grandfather, her parents, were not. They were here in this country working, and my mother and her other sister was born. So when my mother and father got married, my mother's citizenship papers was a bargaining chip for his family. And his family was my mother's family was happy to bring the two together because my father was a successful farmer and owned his own home. So they had an arranged marriage. So my mother had no trouble coming into the States with the 6 of us. We were all American citizens. We were born. When we entered in the country, my oldest sister, Teresa, she was at the age where she lost her citizenship, and she had to apply for her citizenship when we were here in this country. The reason my father wanted to come here was because he wanted to make enough money for his daughter's dowry and go back to Sicily to marry them. My mother told him that was impossible, would never happen. There was, but my father was stubborn and he was insisting. And so through force, verbal force, I'm sure only, he got us all on a ship, and we came to this country. When we came to this country, we were met by my mother's sister and her husband. She had been here living and had 2 children. We lived with them for quite a while until we got our own housing. Once we came to this country, my father knew he could never save enough money to go back, so of course we never did.
Oh, so that's really interesting. So now, so your mother was born in the United States. So how did she wind up back in Italy then?
Well, my grandfather, my mother's mother and father were Sicilian or Italian citizens. My grandfather actually worked on the Holland Tunnel. They came to this country after they got married, and they had my mother and her sister. They came here. Well, my grandfather traveled a lot. He went back and forth to the United States, back to Sicily. And it happened when he brought my grandmother. They had the 2 children who automatically became American citizens, and then they went back. They were there until my mother was about 16, and my mother was the oldest of 6 daughters, and they didn't have enough food to feed the family. So my grandfather took my mother and her sister and came back to the United States, and they worked. My mother actually worked in the garment district in New York City, and so did her sister. So they saved enough money to live on here, and then they sent the rest back to Sicily to support their family. They stayed here for a few years, and then my grandfather and my mother and her sister went back to Visquino, and that's when she married my father. So my mother was an American citizen.
Wow, so that's very interesting. I mean, that's a story different, very different from most,
Yes.
Italian immigrants. And, in my uncle's case, again, he had to apply for citizenship and with his whole family. And even though his, his, all his brothers and sisters were basically born here, and his five brothers all served in World War II, he still had to wait it out with the family in Canada until they were able to come into America. And he had never met his brothers and sisters, and hadn't seen his parents in, I don't know, something like 35 years or something like that. So I know, the couple of books that you sent me that were very interesting. I guess I guess I would call them, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're kind of like a historical fiction, because they are kind of based on events from your family, but not, totally accurate, if you will.
My first book, Gennusa, is loosely based on my family history. I heard stories through the years that my sisters would tell me and my father would tell me, and that's how I started the novel, my first one. It has a lot of history in it that is historically documented. The events of my family is true, but the stories around them is fictional because I wasn't there at the time, or I was too young. So I just made up the story around them. But like, for instance, in the beginning of the first book, Franco and Anna Gennusa, Their Journey, my father had a house in the village, but he rented a farmhouse in the valley where he was an olive grower. He was coming back in his cart with my mother and my sisters. I wasn't born at the time. And they were coming from the farmhouse to the village. And a German plane came right straight towards them. And my father panicked and made all of us get out the cart and run to a tree. Now, my oldest sister told me this story, and she said to me, "Mary, what was Daddy thinking? Did he really think that tree was going to protect us from the plane?" And she started to laugh. And that was actually the beginning of my writing, because that put something in my brain. And I thought, well, that's a great way to start a story about my family. So that's how that all began.
Yeah, no, it was. It really catches your interest, and what I really enjoyed about the book was it really gives you some really good insight into the hardships for I guess Sicilians, but also mainland Italians under the rule of Nazism, and the fact that I guess you could still in some ways go about your business, own your farm, and do things like that, but you weren't free to move around as you would like to, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, we were not. We were not. Now, my oldest sister was going to school. Of course, the school system over there is different from here back at that time and even now. But she told me that she was in a courtyard with her school friends. The teachers brought them there to one of the villages, and she saw Mussolini. And Mussolini was standing on the top of the steps, saying how he was going to join with the Germans because that was where the success was and the money was, and that was their future. And of course, the Italians and the Sicilians didn't want to. They didn't want anything to do with the Nazis, but it was not their choice. It was Mussolini's, and that's what he wanted, and that's what he got. So
So how old was your oldest sister? During the war.
During the war?
Yeah.
But let's see, when we came to this country, we came in 1944. She was 16. So at that time, she might have been about 14.
Yeah, so that's roughly around the same age as my cousin. And when I talked to her about it, they lived in, Bari, Torito, Puglia, which she told me that there wasn't a large German presence there. But that, she remembers the bombers coming and, my aunt gathering up the kids and running into the fields, hoping that, I guess they figured they'd be more safe in the fields than in the town if they were going to, bomb the town. But their town was never bombed. And she said they had very few Germans there, probably because it probably wasn't that strategically important for them,
They were mostly around the perimeter of the island, where the shipyards were, the cargo that was coming in with the food and their supplies. That was where they were mostly when they were on the island.
Yeah, and you do write about the partisans and things like that. And I don't think people realize that like France, that there were also Italians that were underground and fighting the Germans in the best way that they could.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.co. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co.
Yeah, it's interesting how a lot of people at that time did their part and never were acknowledged about it. And of course, they never came out about it. And those are the people we really have to honor and be grateful for, because they were also the ones who helped end the war.
Yeah, no, exactly. Sure. Yeah, they helped, I guess, guide the Americans in and things like that. So now the second book tells the story about a family coming across, on the boat, how tough it was on the ships. And in fact, I just interviewed somebody last week who told me a story very similar to what your story is, only it was a child that died, and they had to watch the family had to watch the child buried at sea. But I think it's a great story. It tells us hardships about the crossing and how hard that decision was to make, and then the family, getting their roots and succeeding in America.
Well, when I think back at it, my father was 50 years old when he brought us over to this country, and that was very brave of him, even though his motives weren't quite understandable because he didn't understand what this country was about. But for a man to take 6 daughters and a boys like that, he was pretty courageous to do that. His motives were right, but of course he wouldn't listen to my mother. But when we get to the second book, that is all fictional. That has nothing to do with my family. From that point on, everything is fictional. I have 2 more books that is a part of the series that have not been published, and I hope to publish those soon. But they are all fictional also. Those are just from my imagination, not from my family. The only thing that I did do is I took my sister's personality in the first book and I brought them all the way through to the 4th book. Their personalities, their strengths, their weaknesses, that sort of thing. Their characteristics.
I gathered that, and to your point, it is fictional, but I think in the stories, as I was reading it, you could relate to what's in the book, and understand that when the Italians came here, it was no picnic. It was very, very difficult for most, and they had to work in sweatshops and in the garment district, and I think it's a story of how immigrants that came before them helped, and it's a story of, I think, also how difficult it was to find work and to succeed, but they did, and I think that's the best part of the story.
Well, that's what's so amazing about this country is there's always work, there's always help. People are never really alone, and that makes this country pretty great. Yeah.
So going back to your family, so the 6 sisters come here, and where did you all settle at first, and where did people move to?
Yeah, we came into the harbor. We did not go to Ellis Island because we're American citizens. We came into the harbor. My mother's sister and her husband picked us up. There was 2 cars because there were so many of us, and we went to her house. That was in Enfield, Connecticut. From there, we stayed with them for several months until we got housing. The problem was there were so many kids that no one would, rent to us. So finally, we found a place. We moved into it. My mother worked in the garment district in Springfield. She worked for Carter Company, made baby clothes and underwear. My father worked for Bigelow Sanford, which was a carpet company, which is no longer there. They moved down south. And so that's where we settled. My father and mother finally bought a house. We all settled on Elm Street, and that's where we all grew up. And we were in a wonderful neighborhood. We never worried about going out at night. It was just a small little town. Everybody knew everybody, and it was wonderful. It was really, really heartwarming to be brought up in such an amazing place and never feel lonely or alone or scared. It was wonderful.
So what? Now your sisters that were older and lived in knew Sicily. When they talked about, did they ever talk about the differences between the two countries and?
Oh yeah. When we came over into this country in the ship, my sisters, I was baby. I didn't know any better. But the food was bad, the water was bad because they were used to fresh vegetables, fresh meat. Everything was made, from scratch. When you go on a transport and you're served hot dogs and beans, they didn't even know what it was, and they couldn't even look at it, let alone eat it. So by the time we came to the States, we were pretty malnourished because and the water wasn't fresh spring water. It was just terrible. So anyways, by the time we got here, we were in a pretty bad situation. And I'm sorry to say I lost my train of thought. What was your question? I'm sorry, Bob. What?
Well, what did they say the differences were between the two countries?
Well, they never wanted to go back to Sicily because they were very confined. My father ruled the roost, and that was it. You didn't say what you want. When we came to this country, it was a lot easier to sneak out at night, and they did. Change from their school clothes and their work clothes, and they would put. This is funny. They sneak out their ballroom gowns and their high heel shoes and their lipstick. They go out with their girlfriends. They go to ballroom dances when my mother thought they were going to the movies. So they never wanted to go back. Besides that, they had trouble that was my point. When we came to this country, the food was so bad and we were in bad condition. They did not want to go back on the ship to go back over there and go through that torture again because they said it was very bad. It was very, very bad. Now, my mother always said that I was a very active child. Once I got on the ship and got off of the ship, I was never active again. So I don't know what transpired in my physical that made me change, my personality changed. I don't know, but that was something my mother had said.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's. But I remember my uncle one time saying to me, he wanted to go back, not to stay. He just wanted to go back to Italy to see what it was like. Now, when they left, they actually owned a house, but it was 2 rooms, bedroom for my aunt and uncle, and my cousin told me and the baby, and she said there was always a baby, so there was always 3 people in there. And then the other room was the kitchen, the living room, whatever, the kids' bedroom, and there was no indoor plumbing. When they left, 1950, they still had no indoor plumbing. And my aunt said, "No way, I'm going back. No, this is too nice." And they were going to go to a hotel and everything. She still didn't want to go.
No, it's quite different, very, very different. I do have a wonderful story to tell you about my trip. Of course, I was just a baby. I don't remember it. But after I published my book, the ship that we came on was called the Marina Perch. This person was talking to his daughter or granddaughter, I don't remember which it was, and wanted to know more about his living in Sicily and his trip over here. And so this person said to his granddaughter, I'll say granddaughter, well, type in the Marina Perch, which she did. And when she did, my book came up. And he contacted my publisher, got all my information, and he called me. And he said, "Mary," and he told me who he was and why he wanted. He says, "When you were on the Marina Perch and you were coming from Sicily to the United States, I was on that ship with you." He says, "You were 3.5, I was 2.5 years old, and my mother was carrying my daughter." So here we were on the same ship coming over to this country, and how he got me was through my book. And he was thrilled to talk to me. And then several months later, we got together. We met in Virginia because he lives in Virginia and I live in Maryland. We went halfway and had lunch together, and it was wonderful. I met his sister. I met his. We all had lunch and we had a lot to share, and it was really wonderful. And it took my book to get us together, which is really amazing.
Wow, that's incredible. That's really something. Yeah, that's almost hard to believe. Although, I have heard, several other stories like that. Now, have you ever gone back to Sicily? Have you gone back to Sicily, to the hometown? Or?
Twice. Yes, I've been back to Sicily twice. I went by the house that I was born in. The very first trip we were there, I went with my two sisters and one of my sister's husband. We're in the center of the village, and it was a festival time. And apparently when American Sicilians come back to Sicily, especially to Bizzaquino, it spreads to the village who's coming. So people knew that we were there. So I was standing with my sister, and this woman and her sister came up to me and she said to me in Sicilian, Gennusa Piccerita, which means, are you the Gennusa children? And I said, yes. And she put her hand up to my face and she said, when your father took you to America, it left a hole in the village. When your father took you to America, it left a hole in our hearts. And I stood there, I did not know what to say to her. It was just like amazing that my family had such an impression on the village. The village is not very large, and we lived just up the street from the center of the village. So everybody knew us. The Gennusa girls, the 6 girls. So yes, it would have been difficult for the village to lose 6 little girls.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yes.
Yeah. So that was an amazing time for us. And then the second time I went was just a few years ago. I went to Sicily with my sister Nancy, my cousin Anna. We went to Madrid, stayed a couple of days, and then picked up another cousin. And from there, we went back to Bizzaquino to our wedding. And that was really amazing to go and see one of my younger cousins getting married and to share it with my family. It was wonderful.
Yeah, and I've met a lot of people remotely, and we were supposed to go a year and a half ago. We're finally going to get there in September, and I have somebody there helping me plan the trip, and she's, I guess, part genealogist, part trip planner, but she's supposedly, and I'm sure she does, has a bunch of surprises for me that she says are just going to, amaze me. So I'm going to meet cousins, third and fourth cousins, but still cousins that I never knew existed, and they never knew I existed. So it's very exciting. So I have to ask you about your dad for a second. So was he shocked, relieved, or both when he found out he didn't have to pay dowries?
At that point, I think he was tired, and my sister got married, and I think he was really willing to let his daughters go. By the time he came to me and my future husband had to ask for my hand in marriage, my father said, take her. So no, I don't think that bothered him at all. I think he accepted the fact we would never go back there. He accepted it.
I'm sure.
Take her. And then the next morning, remember this was the next morning, I got up and I went downstairs, and there's my father and my future husband sitting together, and my husband asked my father for a little bit of brandy for his coffee. They were drinking demi-tasse. So once they drank that was it. My husband was in. My father loved him, So that was fun. That was amazing.
And he wasn't Italian, right? So that's even.
Oh, he was a big Irishman. And that's another story. When we have time, I have to tell you what happened when my father and he met. That's another story. But I did want to go back to my first book real quick. Franklin and Gennusa, Their Journey. I wrote the screenplay to it. It's loosely based on my book. I have a cousin in Sicily, Antonio Costa. He is a director, and he also writes screenplays. I sent him in my information, and I have not heard back from him, but he is going to look at it and get back to me about hopefully putting my screenplay on film. So that's
No, that would be great because I'll put the links out there and everything. But I found it to be, a fascinating book and really a great insight into Italy and Sicily at the time, of the occupation, and learn things that I don't think I ever would have, learned. And again, 2 weeks ago I interviewed somebody who grew up in. He was around, I think 5 or 6 when the Germans were in Naples. He's from Naples. And again, similar kind of stories and, the Germans coming up to his father or I think it was his grandfather in the cart and asking him, where are the caves and where's this? And, terrifying, I'm sure, especially for young kids, I always wind up drifting into food in these conversations because I love to cook. I went to restaurant school, oh God, a long time ago, 35 years ago in New York City. But I understand your son is a chef, yes?
My son is a chef. He went to, and this is a great story, he went to culinary school in San Francisco, to one of the best culinary schools. And during the pandemic, he and I did a lot of cooking together. And I finally said to him, I said, Joey, would you like to learn how to make brajol? Oh, I would love it. So I got all the ingredients out, started from scratch. I showed him how to do everything. And we folded up the brajol. And I says, okay, now you have to tie it. And he says, well, what do you mean? I says, you don't know how to tie brajol? You know how to tie anything? Here he goes to the most expensive school in the United States to learn how to cook. And his little Sicilian mama has to show him how to wrap up brajol. So I wrapped it up and I showed him. He was thrilled. I also taught him how to make homemade pasta. I don't know how to make it with a machine. I've never done it. I do it the old-fashioned way with a rolling, a large, it's not a rolling pin, it's a large.
I know, the big dowel, yeah?
Yeah, that you go back and forth on and how you stretch it out and how you put flour in to keep it from sticking. Then we dried it out, and then once it was dried, I showed him how to cut it and cooked it. And he was just flabbergasted. Here again. I says, Joey, you didn't have to go to California. I could have taught you how to cook. Your mom's cook. So I'm not really that big of a cook. I just know how to cook certain Sicilian meals, like eggplant. I'm known for my eggplant from all my friends who just come and visit me just to want my food. And my friends here, I have a lot of friends up in Connecticut. That's where I grew up. And my friends here in Maryland, they love my food, and we always get together to eat. And so, my middle boy, and he's a very good cook. He cooks for me once in a while, and I'm shocked at how well he does and how he knows about food. So what kind of food do you like to make?
Well, mostly Italian, but I'll tell you about when I went to the restaurant school, I went to New York City, and we were making, pasta one day. We were making Italian food and making fresh pasta, and the teacher says, okay, we're going to measure into the bowl, the flour, and I said, bowl? I said, you don't make pasta in a bowl. He said, what do you mean you don't make pasta? I said, no, you put the flour on the board. I said, you make a well, you put the eggs in the oil, and you slowly. And he said, really? I said, yeah. I said, you don't mix it in a bowl. Nobody mixes it. So I think from that point on, when he taught pasta, he taught it that way. And he said, oh, this is Grandma Sorrentino. And my uncle Frank, he was a great cook. He would make the pasta the way you did on the board with the big rolling it out. And to this day, I marvel about how he could get that dough just to the right thickness.
And the roundness.
Yeah, everything. And make make the ravioli, flip it over. And I wrote a song. I'll have to send you the song. I wrote a song about my cousin Frank was about 16. I must have been about, 11 or so. And they used to put the ravioli on the sofa to dry. They put down a sheet, and my uncle put, probably 12 dozen ravioli, however many he made, on the living room couch to dry. Well, my cousin Frank, I don't know, it was always there ever since I can remember, went and sat on the ravioli. So I wrote a song, Don't Sit on the Ravioli.
Oh, that's funny.
So I'll have to send it to you so you can listen to it. You'll enjoy it. But I kind of cook everything because I did go to school. But I love Italian, cooking Italian, and I have on the website some of my family recipes that are out there. And my grandmother, my father's mother, would make she would make a braciole, but they were a little bit well off. So she would make a veal braciole in this onion sauce, and it's marvelous. I'm sure I don't make it quite as well as her because they said ours was the best. I'm sure it was, but it's quite different because it's not in a red sauce. It's more in you use like a Vidalia onion and you use lots of onions, and it comes out in this creamy brown sauce type of thing, and it's really very, very good. And I also have one of my distant cousins who we found each other. This is interesting. She was researching I think it was her great great grandmother, Maria Pirmalo, and I was researching her also. I found her also. Only two Pirmalos came to America: her great great grandmother and my grandmother. And her great great grandmother was my grandmother's aunt. And I got a message one time through Ancestry, and she said, "I think we're researching the same person. I wonder if we're related." So she told me who it was, and I said, "Yeah, we're definitely related. There's no question about it. I know exactly who it is." She had her doubts, and she finally did the Ancestry, and we were matched up. What we didn't realize was that our families from 1915, when my grandmother got here, through the 1960s, maybe even a little bit later, were actually very, very, very close. And we had no idea that either one of us existed. And we finally got together and met, and it was like we knew each other forever. These things are weird when it happens, but you have that kind of attachment. You know what I mean?
It's amazing, isn't it? You just feel it. You just know it's there.
Yeah, and I found a wonderful cousin in Italy, who has just been going out of her way to find stuff in general, but also in working with the person for the trip. And she just went out, in fact, she sent it today. She went to the cemetery where my great grandfather is buried, and actually took a picture of. And you know how they do in Italy? They have the plaques with the photos,
Yes,
and there's a picture of him and his second wife. And I had never seen the man before.
Yeah.
And it's even there's a few of us who really get into this stuff, and I don't think she was ever interested before, but she's been just so super helpful and everything. It's just been wonderful. So. Before we go, where can people find the books? I'll certainly put the links out there. I know they're on Amazon, and I'll put the links. But
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can find all my information on Facebook about me. Paula Calamara is my acting agent. You can get in contact with her, and she has all my information. And Paula is, I'm going to give you her email address. It's info@scriptslimited.com. Her and her partner, Paul, have helped me with my writing. They've helped me make it more professional. The story is all mine. They just wanted to make sure it came across as professional as possible. These two people are amazing. They've helped me. They've opened up a lot of doors for me. So if anyone is looking for that kind of person to help them, contact Paul and Paula. They are really good. Now, Paul mostly is good for screenplays. Paula does them too, but that's his expertise. They live in Cleveland. In fact, I talked to Paula just before I spoke to you. She gave me a few little hints on what to talk about. Let's see, what else? Oh, I do have a book on poetry. This is my book on poetry. Very simple, very light poetry. It's understandable and it's relatable if anyone is interested in that. I think that's about it. I don't know what else I could say. I've gotten some great reviews on Amazon for my first and my second book. I would love to have people read it because I think it's good reading. I think it's entertaining. I think it's relatable. I think a lot of people can relate to my writing because it's simple and it tells about people's experience, and they can experience the same thing through these characters.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely agree, and that's what I really enjoyed about it. It is, they are, good reads, fast reads, and very informative too. So certainly a lot of fun. Well, thanks, Mary. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm sure we'll talk again as the other books come out, and if we ever get that screenplay done.
Okay, I will keep in contact with me, and I'll keep contact with you. And thank you so much for today. This has been really amazing, and thank you again.
Oh, you're quite welcome.